Okay, here's the story. Right after Pearl Harbor, I got a job with the federal government in Washington, D.C. I lived in the Bronx, New York. First time leaving home. Went to work for Washington. Yeah, not George Washington. Anyway, that was a time when, right after Pearl Harbor, the next month, January of 1942, hundreds of thousands of people came to Washington, D.C. from all over the United States, maybe even from all over the world, to work towards the war effort. This was a humongous undertaking, and naturally it involved probably every department that the government had. War Department, Navy Department, whatever other departments there are. Financial, War Department. Anyway, I wound up in the Finance Department after 8 weeks of doing nothing, along with thousands and thousands of other people just waiting for an assignment to get a job. After all, when you think of how many things had to be done in order to employ so many people so fast in so many diversified skills or non-skills. The wind-up was I worked in the Finance Department. I was there just a few days, got to know a young guy there, just like me, only he was all set to get into the Air Corps. And he came to me one day. I knew he had a job working for a boss, and he was the only employee. I was working for a boss, or maybe 15 bosses, along with thousands of other people at that time, just a short time. And the story is that I told him I was unhappy with my job. He said, well, why don't you take my job? He said, I'll just introduce you to the boss. And apparently that was all that was required. He introduced me to the boss. The boss didn't ask me a single question. The boss himself was a retired military from World War I, and I was a different generation, by far. Anyway, my friend, just before leaving, took me on a tour of various buildings of the government, in which, where I would have a free hand to enter the buildings. I'm sure there was some security set up, but not against someone like myself who would have a pass. And I could also stop a jitney, one of these traveling taxis for the government. Anytime I'm in the street and a jitney came along, I could hail it and just hop on and say I want to go to the munitions building, or I wanted to go to some other building, the State Department or whatever, or railroad retirement building. Anyway, that's the story up to that point, and the boss told me one day, after about 3 days of my trying to simply find out what the job was all about, it was basically a research job and reporting to a correspondence department with final decisions on what should be done with a particular case of somebody who has bought war bonds and didn't know that their money was actually received, or whether they owned any bonds, or whatever happened to their money. So this was from all over the country and maybe all over the world. In a few days, the boss called me in. He said, Sam, you're doing a fine job, and tomorrow you're going to have 300 people to train. So somehow I was all of 19 years old, so I wasn't too excited either way. It didn't seem to scare me, and I just took it for granted that that's what I was going to do. The next day, sure enough, 300 people were waiting for me to train them to do the job that I was doing, which I knew very little about. Well, long story short, I must have done a good job. I immediately I did some very quick interviewing with 300 people. I didn't interview them all, but I interviewed a few people that seemed to stand out in my estimation as not being average or below average. And so I appointed a few supervisors, and most of the day from then on for me was supervising, teaching, answering questions about what to do next about a particular case. And we used to get congressional letters of complaint from congressmen, or maybe people they knew. They had a red border around the letters, and it got top priority every time, of course. And they were complaining about, oh, I invested, $15,000 already. I don't have a single receipt, and I would have to do something real hurry about it. And so it went. And, well, there's a lot more to tell, but I'll see whether I'm focused and in focus and whether you can hear me. And so I'm going to fade slowly with the device I created on this little camera and say farewell for now. Absolutely true story from Empathic Sam.